This is so exciting. We have David Hogg. Hello, David. So Leaders We Deserve, you co-founded it, you run it, and you are helping to elect young progressives to get rid of the status quo, right? Disrupt things. Can you give us some examples of some of the young folks you're helping to get elected, besides Zoran Mamdani? Bravo, by the way, for that. Who are you seeing out there in the world, and what is the energy of people that you're finding who are running for office and then you're helping to get elected?
A lot of the young people that we're seeing out there right now are people like NIDA alum who have their election coming up in a safe congressional district. Obviously, it's a primary that's coming up. And this district has faced some of the largest cuts from DOGE because it's in the North Carolina Research Triangle of any district in the country. And the member of Congress who currently represents there, Valerie Foushee, has repeatedly failed to successfully stand up to help fight back against those DOGE cuts, fight back against ICE or more. And NIDA, her and I, unfortunately, have similar origin stories that are rooted in gun violence, where she got involved in politics after several of her friends were murdered in an anti-Muslim hate crime, and then ended up working for Bernie Sanders, ran for Congress, lost by a pretty slim margin in 2022 in a very crowded primary, then became a county commissioner, helped to raise the minimum wage in the county, lower property taxes for people that are near the poverty line as well, and she's done a lot of great work on the county commission, and now she's running there. And this is a really big moment for our organization because there's a lot of people in Washington who think that if you're a Democrat that's in a safe congressional seat, that you can take as much corporate money as you want, you can take as much support from AIPAC as you want, and you're going to be fine. Nobody's ever really going to seriously ever challenge you. Except this cycle, we're seeing that turn around, where right now we've seen polling that's showing that NIDA is at basically 50-50 at the moment with her opponent, which is exceptionally rare for a Democratic challenger in a primary against an incumbent. Since 2018, there's only about 8 Democrats that have lost to other Democrats that were challenging incumbents. And this could be a huge shakeup and send a clear message to our party that it's time for people to either get their act together or step aside and let a new generation lead. And I think there's one thing that I got to be really clear on. There are lots of great older people out there too, including in Congress. We're not just challenging somebody,
including on this podcast.
No,
exactly.
Don't include the podcast.
What?
David, finish that sentence. But I've got a question for you.
We have a whole campaigns team that does research every single day on what seats are not filled right now. And then we try to find younger people to run for those state legislative and congressional seats. Most of Congress is recruited out at this point, so we're really focusing on state leg this cycle for our recruitment before the filing deadlines happen. But the way that works is sometimes we will go through local newspapers to find people who were organizers at local protests for No Kings, or we'll go through and find who were the top students, or were in student government at local colleges, or we'll go through and find who's working in the state legislature right now, and we'll go through their thing called Legistorm, and we'll find, for example, in one state ledge district that we're working on recruiting somebody in right now, we ended up finding a potential candidate there because we looked up the Legistorm for that area because it's near the state capitol. And we found somebody who's potentially very interested in running for that seat. So it's a combination of people either coming to us through our website, signing up there. But what we see a lot, Robert, is disproportionately the people that come to us, and this is not just us, it's across the board, disproportionately it's younger men. We actually spend a lot of time telling completely unqualified young men that should not be in Congress or a state legislature that they absolutely should not be there and what they need to do to get more experience to be able to be ready to serve there. And a lot of time as well, trying to convince a lot of well-qualified younger women who just don't think it's their time to run or don't think that they can serve, that they actually can, and they have the experience that we need in office.
So, David, let me ask you a very large, very, very important question. Are you optimistic about the future of the Democratic Party?
I am. And the reason for that is because when we started Leaders We Deserve, part of the reason why I started it was because I studied American history, and a lot of the American history that I studied was in the 20th century, in particular the Cold War and some of the history of the CIA in Central and South America, but I don't need to get into that. Part of what I studied was the end of the Soviet Union. And what I saw was how there were so many people waiting to take leadership positions there that it literally took somebody dying or being killed to be removed from those positions of power. And then eventually there was somebody who waited so long in that position that one person after another died in the leadership of the Soviet Union. And then I looked at the Democratic Party in Congress, and I thought, wow, it's not exactly the same, obviously, but we have a party that has empowered so many people with an older electorate of baby boomers that have been there for so long that eventually there is going to be a huge power vacuum that we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to fill with candidates who don't take corporate money, who aren't supported by AIPAC, and are truly loyal more than anything to their constituents. And that's why we decided to build Leaders We Deserve. It started out with helping elect my friend Maxwell Frost to Congress. Maxwell worked for March for Our Lives, the organization we started after Parkland. I hired him from my freshman dorm room when I was in college. And then he ended up calling me up 2 years later, and he said, David, I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is I have to leave March for Our Lives, and the good news is I'm running for Congress. And I said, Maxwell, you know you're 24, right? You have to be 25 to be elected to Congress. And he said, yes, luckily I'll be old enough by the time I'm elected. And I saw how difficult it was for him to run for office. He had to Uber drive every night from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. while running for Congress. He had to raise nearly $3 million to get elected to that position. And what I realized from that experience was that while it was amazing to see Maxwell get elected, he helped us create the Office of Gun Violence Prevention at the White House that then oversaw the two largest one-year reductions in gun homicide in American history. I thought this is so amazing, but I can't imagine how many other young people there are that have marched with us, that have protested with us, that just don't have the resources or the right advice to get elected, especially to state legislatures, where there is so much untapped power that Republicans have tapped into for decades that we really have not stepped up enough to the plate to build. And that's why we built Leaders We Deserve, to effectively be like Emily's List for young Democrats running for state legislatures and Congress, who don't take corporate money and want to focus on taking on the special interests that have brought our generation to the pretty terrible point that we're in right now.
I have a question. So Bob and I spoke last week on our coffee, about how young men are turning against Trump on average, right? Everyone was so scared. Look at how many points he's moved this young male electorate, and many people of color in there. And now you're starting to see the numbers change, right? They don't appreciate what's happening in terms of immigration. They don't appreciate what's happening, especially in terms of the economy and their personal sense of affordability. So does that track with what you're seeing on the ground, that younger folks, as a do you say Gen Zer? Do you say Zoomer?
Zoomer.
So what do we think about these changes we're seeing in the young male, specifically, electorate?
I have a metaphor to describe this, and it's not just young men that are like this. I think it's young people in general. I think it's especially acute for young men that increasingly, as our society progresses, are falling behind in our education system. We know that on average, young men tend to be basically developmentally about a year and a half behind most younger women. And so that already creates its own set of challenges in the first place. And naturally, when you build a more equal society and those men start to struggle more, they're going to feel like, well, it's going to be easier for them to say the reason why I'm not doing as well is because I'm, for example, not going to college as much. It's going to be easier for somebody like Andrew Tate to come along and say the reason you aren't doing so well is because women are, getting more opportunities than you are, instead of explaining, because you associate college, for example, with being there's this phenomenon in sociology called male flight, where as an institution or group becomes seen as more effeminate because it becomes more equal, men to stop participating in it a lot of the time because it's seen as effeminate to go to college, for example. It's a lot easier for somebody like Andrew Tate to say, oh, the reason you're falling behind is because you're being discriminated against as a man, and make millions of dollars off of that message, instead of saying to them, actually, you're a victim of your own internalized patriarchy that is causing you not to do things that are in your own economic best interests, that are then resulting in you being materially worse off than your parents a lot of the time. But the metaphor that I have for this is that last election cycle, we were looking at the data of GDP and the S&P, and we were saying to young people who we know do not own those assets nearly as much as older generations, what do you mean that you feel like the economy isn't doing good right now? The stock market's doing so well, the GDP is doing so well. These macroeconomic figures are telling us what you were telling us that you were feeling isn't actually true. So when you tell people not to believe their wallets, and then when they tell you that the president is too old, and then their response is no, he's not, and then yes, he is 107 days before the election, you're going to lose those people. And effectively, our message, I think, to young voters, in particular young men, sounds like this. Hey, we know that you're telling us that you feel like you're 10 feet underwater right now. What if you were 9 feet, underwater. Wouldn't that be better? Because those Republicans, they want to put you at 15 feet underwater. And what young people want isn't to be told, they don't want to be underwater at all. They want to see a hand reach down that actually pulls them to the surface. And when you're in that panicked state, you're going to reach out to whichever hand it is. Politically, it may be on the right. Politically, it may be on the left. You don't care if you are struggling to survive. You're going to look at whatever hand you think is going to pull you to the surface the fastest. And in that environment of us telling them repeatedly, don't believe what you're feeling, you shouldn't believe it because all these numbers are telling us that you shouldn't, they're going to reach out to a different hand that pulls them up. And of course, they've completely failed as Republicans. They ran on making things more affordable. They haven't. They ran on releasing the Epstein files, which they have, that then implicated them very obviously. And in that environment, they're going to come back to Democrats. But the reason for that isn't because we're providing a better message. It's because Republicans have done such a god-awful job. And that may be enough for us to win back the House, but it's not enough for us to build long-term power. And what we are seeing in our data is that, last night I was on a Zoom with John Delvelope, one of the top pollsters that focuses on young people. He's polled young people for the past 20 years. And what he said to us was that what young people are looking for in candidates is not so much their political affiliation. They're looking for similarity in lived experience. There is no better way of doing that than electing younger people and giving them a better shot so that young people can see somebody like Zoran and say, actually, I do feel represented by this person. And guess what? They're doing the most important thing, listening. When Zoran went out there and started campaigning, you know what he didn't do? He didn't do what most politicians do and say, hey, here are all the things that I'm going to do for you. He started out by asking, hey, what do you want to see in a mayor of New York City? What can I do for you? And then he listened to that feedback and actually built a campaign and expanded the electorate so that he was actually able to win. And that's what we're trying to do at Leaders to help solve that problem, is get more people who, for example, when they're talking about lowering rents, it's coming from a messenger who's paid rent in the 21st century. Because you can have the best poll-tested message you want, but if the messenger isn't credible, it doesn't matter. And our party loves to go on and on about messaging. We can A/B test. We can't A/B test our way out of this when our real problem is a courage problem and a messenger and credibility.
Also, we've seen this stat: 54% of the electorate in 2028 will be millennial and Gen Z. 54%. It's the highest ever.
If they voted. If they voted. And
exactly.
I think the interesting thing to me, how important, David, it is to get young people out to vote, to inspire them about politics. I mean, Mamdani did an amazing job in terms of recruiting an army of young people. My 17-year-old granddaughter was going weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, door to door for Mamdani. And so were all our friends. So were thousands and thousands of young people in New York who couldn't even vote yet. I think that to me, is one of the most important lessons for the Democrats from the Mamdani campaign, is get out the vote, get young people involved.
But look at how we treated him, too, through that process. Like, that's the crazy thing about our party. We say, oh my God, we need to win back young people. And then you have a guy like Zoran, who the data show us got 3 times the 18 to 24-year-old turnout of Kamala Harris in his primary. 3 times that turnout. And what did our party do? We said, oh my God, this guy's going to be a disaster. It's a nightmare. We can't support him. We need to all consolidate behind Andrew Cuomo. Even after Zoran won the primary, the same people who always tell us to vote blue no matter who, then we're like, oh my God, there's no way that we can ever talk about Zoran. And the question is to our party, the question that we face is not, can we win back young people? It's, are we willing to empower the candidates that actually resonate with young people? Because it may not be the candidates that are completely aligned with the establishment. But in order for us to win back the House, in order for us to win back the Senate and the presidency eventually, we have to give younger voters candidates that actually resonate with them. And sometimes that's not going to be candidates that the establishment necessarily like.
Also, the GOP is not helping itself. I mean, when you look at Governor Abbott and you know this, you founded or co-founded and ran March of Our Lives, which was, against gun violence and predicated on the power of peaceful protest and getting out and getting your voices heard. And so here we have in Texas all these students who are protesting, leaving school to say, we don't appreciate ICE. And so what does Abbott say? He's cracking down on these schools. That is not going to help in the future.
It's going to backfire.
For them, right?
It'll help the movement. I will tell you that much. You want to get a young person to do something, tell them what not to do, and they will do that thing, especially teenagers, right?
Well, but also there's a very, very large question in the background, and that is, what is the Democratic Party? Is it a fundraising machine? Is it just big money? Or is the Democratic Party something very, very different from what it's been? I mean, one of the reasons that so much money was behind Andrew Cuomo is that Andrew Cuomo was the establishment, and that's where the money wanted to go. But that assumes that the Democratic Party is big money, is the establishment. And I think that what you are saying, David, what the people you are finding and representing are saying is that no, the Democratic Party is something very, very different. It's young people, it's people of color, it's people who want to make the nation different and progressive, and that social justice is very central to the meaning and purpose of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And what we're trying to do, and the reason why our candidates don't take corporate money, is because I remember being a 16-year-old voter in Florida, or not voter, but a 16-year-old who was registering to vote after I got my driver's license. And I remember people often ask, in Florida, we have this huge issue with the number one growing political party in Florida is none, the no party affiliations. That is who people are registering to vote with most. And I understand why that's happening. When I was registering to vote as a 16-year-old in Broward County, after I got my driver's license, I remember the person asking me, do you want to be a Democrat, registered as a Democrat or Republican? I said, well, I don't want to be either, because I said to myself, do I identify more with Democrats? Sure, but here's the reality. I feel like both are owned and controlled by the same special interests and corporations that have made our lives suck. So why would I want to associate with a party that I lightly agree with more, but I feel like doesn't properly represent me, because it still represents a lot of the same special interests? And then I eventually registered as a Democrat because the lady at the DMV told me, well, you can't vote in a primary if you're not registered as a Democrat. And I was like, fine, I'm a Democrat. But what I think we need to do as a party is say, we are the party of the 99%. We are the party not of corporations and special interests, but we are the party of the American people. And guess what? We're the party that actively works to make government work. After all, we're the party that helped to create Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And we also need to acknowledge and be honest with voters and say, look, our job is a hell of a lot harder than it is for Republicans, because unlike them, we don't run on the idea that government is terrible, it never can do anything right, and then get elected and make it terrible and make it not do anything right, and then repeat that cycle every election cycle. It is always going to be harder to make something work, and we need to have the right oversight over universal child care programs, over our welfare programs, to ensure that they aren't being abused and that there is as little fraud as possible. But ultimately, we do have a harder job of trying to make government actually work in the first place. But that's what I want our party to represent, so that when young people especially go and register to vote, they know that Democrats, or at least a large segment of our party, doesn't represent special interests. And long term, our party won't represent those special interests. We will represent the American people and what they need most.
I love your passion. So good. Thank you for coming on today, David.
David, thank you.
Absolutely. There's one last thing I want to say too, though, before I go. I have a request of you, if this hasn't been done before. I'm not in college anymore, so I don't have access to all the literature and all the publications that I used to. But I will tell you, the biggest reason why there are not more young people that run for office is not because there aren't young people who don't want to run. It's because it is a major, especially for state legislature, they cannot afford to do it. In many states, you are paid less than $10,000 a year to be a state senator or to be a state representative. And that is part of the reason why there are so many young people that do not run. So I don't know if there is research out there on this, but I would love to talk to you more about how we can get the word out more about part of the reason why our government sucks is because we can only elect people that often are employed or come from those very special interests in the first place that don't actually represent a lot of the majority of people.
That's a very good point. I would love to talk to you about it, David.
Great. And if anybody wants to support us, they can go to leaderswedeserve.com. Because again, we rely on small dollar donations, not corporations. So we really do need people's support to help our candidates get across the finish line and not unilaterally disarm so that we can get real financial support behind them.
Thank you for all of your work and for coming on today.
Thank you, David.